All right. Basically, today we're going to look at a bit of jurisprudence. We're going to look at legal philosophy. More specifically, we're going to look at primary and secondary rules.
Primary rules.
Now I'm going to explain what each of them actually means. But this is what we're going to look at today, right? It's sort of from this guy called H.L.A. Hart, right? In his book, The Concept of Law, 1961. Now, Hart is a very influential guy in legal philosophy. If you study any legal philosophy, you'll know about Hart. And if you don't know about Hart, you didn't study legal philosophy, okay? That's simple, all right? And The Concept of Law is one of the most influential texts regarding legal philosophy as well. So, very cool book. All right, Concept of Law. Okay, so this book actually sort of disputes this other legal philosopher, John Austin, right? His idea, who sort of explains that the law is, and I quote, a rule laid down for the guidance of an intelligent being by an intelligent being having power over him, right? And so essentially we're doing legal philosophy. Essentially what John Austin tries to prove is that, society has rules because there's another power having power over someone else, right? That's sort of what John Austin says. And he sort of explains that law is just the command of a sovereign, right? Another higher power, having rules over someone else. But the concept of law sort of goes against that and explains that, maybe the law isn't justice, maybe rules aren't justice, right? And so here we have primary and secondary rules. Right, so Hart is what we call a positivist, right? He sort of explains that the law isn't simply just someone having power over someone else, but he explains that, rules, there are other rules that exist beyond just you do this and I'll punish you otherwise, right? Which is sort of what old kings and queens rule looked like. Now.
Wait.
Yeah.
So instead of rules being what the sovereign says, what is it?
They're primary secondary rules, which I'll explain right now. What they are, right? So instead of just having one sovereign, one big power saying you must do this, or I'll kill your family, or I'll take away your cattle, or something like that, right? We have these sort of stuff now, right? Now essentially, what he delineates that there are these two rules that make up a legal system, right? Let's start with primary rules. Now, primary rules, right? What he defines this as essentially rules that apply to the behavior of regular citizens, right? He explains that these rules are essentially what people can and cannot do, right? For example, you can't rob a bank. That's a primary rule, right? And he calls these duty imposing rules, right? So they give you essentially a duty. You can't rob a bank. You can't hit someone. You can't kill anyone, right? Very simple. You can't do this, right? Now, secondary rules are essentially rules about the primary rules, right? For example, someone can make a primary rule. Someone can change a primary rule. Someone can decide when a primary rule has or hasn't been violated, right? And essentially, he calls these secondary rules power conferring rules. I spelled that right? Power conferring? Yeah, power conferring rules.
Secondary rules can change primary rules?
Yeah, so essentially, that's one form of secondary rule. It essentially dictates whether people have authority or normative power, right? In regards to primary rules. Now, a normative power, right, a normative rule could be that you have the permission to do something. Oh, wait, what the hell am I writing here? What the hell is this saying? I typed this up wrong. Oh, essentially, normative rules are essentially rules that give you permission even if you don't have the capacity to do something, right? For example, you have the ability, so I let you move a table. You might not have the strength to move the table, but I allow you to do the table. To move the table, right? That's a normative rule, right? You have the permission to move the table, even if you don't have the necessary capacity to move the table. That's what a normative rule is like, right? Giving someone power to do something, even if they don't have the physical power to do it, right? Or they don't have the capabilities to do it, right?
What kind of rule is that?
That's a normative rule. So secondary rules can be normative rules, right?
Right.
Or they give you authority over something, right?
Oh.
So you can change something, you can do whatever, even if you might not have, physical capabilities of doing it, right? But it's like giving someone permission, essentially. That's what secondary or normative rules can look like. So now, in order for a system of rules to be considered a legal system, we have to have both primary and secondary rules, right? It is a necessary but not sufficient condition for a legal system. That's an important distinction we have to make. Essentially, without these rules, a system of rules cannot be a legal system. But just having this is just sort of the foundation for a legal system. You have to have other things on top of that for it to be an actual substantiated legal system. Yes?
So is a primary rule something like you have to do this?
Yeah.
While a secondary rule is something like you have the permission to do this, like, or you can do this. You have the
No,
power.
it's more in regards to primary rules. So you have the permission to change a primary rule.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But like duty imposing means you have to do this.
Yeah.
It's a rule about what you have to do. And then power conferring rule is something about you can.
You have the capacity to
power.
do this,
Yes, like,
right?
You have the
yeah.
power to do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's like, you can't kill someone,
Yeah.
or you can try to, you can.
So rights are secondary rules.
Right?
It's almost like a right. Yeah, you have the right to something, right? But technically, rights fall under both of these. You have the right to like change something, or like,
Yeah.
For example, like, primary rule can be like you can't kill someone, and then power conferring can be like, I give you permission to stop someone from killing someone, right? Even if you can't stop someone from doing that. Okay, now, Hart illustrates the usefulness of secondary rules by essentially imagining a system of rules that only incorporate primary rules, right? Like imagining a system that only has primary rules. Now he's going to tell us that in a system of only primary rules, there are going to be defects, right, that can only be solved in the form of such secondary rules, right? Now, what would a system of primary rules actually look like? Now, Hart proposes the example of the rule of etiquette, right? The system of etiquette seems like a pure set of primary rules, right? You can or you can't do something. There's no commissioner who can change, what etiquette means, and there's nobody with some authority to decide what exactly is etiquette, right? Etiquette is a system purely of primary rules, right? You can't put your elbows on the table when you eat, right? You can't, chew loudly with your mouth, right? It's just a set of power conferring, duty imposing rules without any body to say, why can't we change the etiquette? Why can't we, decide what is now etiquette, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So does all secondary rules, does all power conferring rules have like an institution corresponding with it?
Typically in our society that does, right?
Right.
We have manifested, these institutions that support secondary rules,
Yeah.
right? But it doesn't have to be the case, right? You don't have to have, it could just be one, like in a very primitive society, for example, a single person could have the job of a secondary rule, right?
Right.
Whether it's like a judge or something,
Right.
but it just happens in our society that you have, a jury and you have a,
Yeah, right. So you need an institution to carry out.
in society,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you just have one person that's like dominating the society, and you have the sovereign again, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. What? Okay, another example is gendered rules. We're going back to feminism
Whoa.
again, all right?
Let's go.
All right, let's say we go back in time, 100 years, right? Women can't wear pants, right? That's a primary rule, right? That's just not allowed for women to do things like a man, right? I'm not saying I agree with that, but if we go back 100 years, maybe this was just happened to be the case, right? But that's a primary rule, right? Women can't do this, women can't do that, right? Now, in both examples, there are rules that say that this is what happens, right? You can and can't do this.
Frederick.
And they're only rules because a large enough population agreed upon these rules, right? But nobody could particularly change these rules, right? Nobody can really change etiquette. And that's why we call things like law a social phenomenon, because it only occurs because a large enough people agree upon these set of rules, and it just agree that we'll follow these rules. Hi. Ethics Club.
Ethic.
Okay, he just left. Okay. Okay, but if you look at the example of gender rules of pants, right? essentially, in order for us to have changed that, we'd have to have convinced a large enough group of people that this shouldn't be a rule, and so it changed. The only reason that the gender rules have changed is because we managed to convince a significant group of people that we should have a different rule instead, right? And this is actually one of the defects of a system that only consists of primary rules. It's what we call stagnation, right? Is that it's really incredibly hard to change these gender rules, right? Think about how long it took, women's suffrage movement, everything, right? It took a long time, right? And it was essentially stagnated, right? And so that's why we need things like secondary rules, right, to help change these sort of defects, or to help, alleviate these defects in a system of rules, right? So now we're going to actually look at so for example, if we had a council, a parliament, or any sort of body that could help, take care of these secondary rules, then a system of rules would be very sufficient, or be good enough, at least as a foundation for a legal system. So now let's actually talk about what are the 3 defects that Hart proposes in a system of merely primary rules, right? First of all, I'm going to actually rub this out, just so we have some more space. I'll rewrite this. First one. Now, this isn't any particular order for what's the most important or pertinent or anything. This is just an order that happens to be. All right, first one, uncertainty. Now, he gives us a lot of quotes, but I'm going to read it out to you because it actually it makes a lot of sense, right? He says that, hence, if doubts arise as to what the rules are, or as to the precise scope of some given rule, there will be no procedure for settling this doubt, either by reference to an authoritative text or to an official whose declaration on this point are authoritative, right? That's a lot of yapping, right? So to explain what he's saying, right? He essentially says that if we don't know what the rules are, we can never figure them out without someone of power to define them or to create these rules, right?
Okay, so that's one problem with primary rules only, right?
Yeah.
And then another problem would be the stagnation, right?
I'll explain all of them. I'll also give them a thought experiment, basically, to imagine this, more thoroughly.
Okay, and that's why we need secondary rules.
Yeah.
Right.
So at its core, this is all it's trying to say. We won't know what the rules are if there's no one defining what the rules are, right? So we can imagine, right? Imagine a small group of people living in a valley. Right, I'm going to draw this out for you.
Ooh.
A valley, right? This is our little valley. And you have your little people living on this little valley in their little houses and everything, right? Actually, no, probably in the valley, my bad. My fault. They got their little valleys and everything, and they all live happily in this little valley. And there's a river through this valley at some point. We'll extend this out. There's a river going on here, Now, in this small community, they have rules that they accept, right? For example, on certain weeks, you go up to your little grass and everything, and you have your cows. You have to graze your cow on one side of the valley per week, right? Just so we don't overgraze the grass. On this particular week, you have to graze your cow on this side, right? And on the next week, you graze on the other side, and so forth, right? That's sort of a rule that everyone has just accepted, right? And so if someone breaks this rule, what do? We criticize them. You're a bad person. We punish them. No more cattle for you, right? And that's just this rule that this society has accepted, right? Graze your cows on either side, right? But we don't have a town council or a king, right? Or any sort of authoritative body to enforce these rules, right? We don't have any secondary rules. And so, suddenly we have this dispute, right? Someone discovers that, oh no, they've grazed their cow on the wrong side of the cow, on the one side of the valley, right? They've grazed their cow on the wrong side. That's really bad. That's super bad, right? They're gonna overfeed, right? But this is the dispute, and well, who's gonna stop them, right? Who's gonna stop this person from grazing their cow if we don't have someone saying, you broke the rules, right? So, if we only have primary rules, there's no way to settle this, right? There's no systematic way to resolve this, just like how there's no systematic way of resolving etiquette, right? If someone does something that's, rude at a table, there's no really way to stop them from just like, eating with their mouth open. And so that's the defect we have with, a system of just primary rules, because there's so much uncertainty, right? Who's going to stop this person from grazing their cow on the side of the valley? Who's going to stop someone from, eating with their mouth open, right?
That's why you need to confer power to someone.
Exactly, we need to confer power. That's what secondary rules are for, right? So if we did have a secondary rule that makes someone this authoritative body, we could solve this problem, right? They'd be like, you're bad, banished from the village now, right? You can no longer live in that valley anymore, right? So very easy. Otherwise, this group might just fall into chaos. Everyone's gonna start fighting over, if this person was right or wrong, right? And that's really bad. But another way that we could do this could be to have some sort of script, right? Maybe in the center of the town, there's a pedestal that has a paper on it. And this paper says that if someone breaks this rule, here's what happens to them. Here's a procedure that happens, right? That's also, that might just be the law, But like, this could be how we solve it, right? And maybe this could be solved by some democratic way, If everyone votes that this paper should say this, then maybe this becomes what the paper says, and not everyone has to follow that piece of paper, right? That's the law, right? But so the secondary rule we call this is called the rule of recognition. It's one of the most important rules. We recognize this person, right? I'll write it down for you. Rule of recognition. Rule of recognition. This is a very important rule in this secondary rules among them, because it directly solves this issue, right? Now we know who can stop them? Someone can stop them from overgrazing their cow, right? That's bad. Now, second one, right?
So like it gives power to this body.
So the power conferring rule, it makes sense with this rule. We're giving someone power to decide, someone who's violated that rule. Second one, right?
Second problem.
Staticness. Okay.
I hate it when society promotes progress.
Oh God, right? A system of merely primary rules is static. Now let's read another extract from the concept of law. All right. The only mode of change in the rules known to such a society with only primary rules will be the slow process of growth, whereby courses of conduct only or once thought optimal become first habitual or usual and then obligatory, and the converse process of decay, when deviations once severely dealt with are first tolerated and then pass unnoticed. Now, what does that mean? Right? Let's break that down. Right? Essentially, it's talking about how rules change. Right? If we only have primary rules, then the only way to change them is to get every single person to agree on a new set of rules, just like how women can wear pants now. We've gone through and said everyone now can agree that women can wear pants. And so we have women wearing pants in today's society, right? So cool. But the thing is, these rules have to change very slowly as a result, right? In order to get every single person in this little village to agree on a new set of rules, that's going to take a long, long time, right? That's going to take forever to go knocking on everyone's door, hey, agree to this set of rules. And they go, okay, sure, right? That takes forever, right? So in our primitive little society again, right, in the valley, with their little houses and people and river and everything, right? Yeah.
So like changing primary rules by itself takes too long.
Yeah, it takes forever. It's very static, right? Without secondary rules.
How do we fix it?
So in our primitive community, the rules came about because enough people thought it would be optimal to graze the grass on one side of the river at a time, right? On one side of the valley at a time. They thought it was very optimal, even though it wasn't required, right? They thought it was just optimal. Then it became common practice, and eventually what he calls obligatory, right? This is slow, and it only takes time before people start taking it as a habit, and then it starts becoming obligation, right? Why do I have so much gendered attire stuff in my notes? That's crazy.
It's just born a feminist.
Yeah, I'm just born a feminist, right? But anyways, the defect is that the rules change slowly, right? Or cannot even change very deliberately. Right? So how do we solve this? Well, we could have a secondary rule, like a Congress, that can change the rules if we have, say, 50% of people in agreement, right? If 50% of people raise their hand in the village and say, okay, we'll change the rules, then maybe the script changes, the law, the paper on the pedestal changes, right? And then that's a very quick way to change it. Snap, right? Paper changes, new rules are now set, right? Staticness solved.
Right. So this one would be like, we confer power to the Congress.
Yeah, we say that
to change the primary rules.
to change the primary rules, right? So now instead of waiting for everyone to agree that you don't need grace on both sides, you now snap of your fingers, and not everyone has to agree, or else they'll be banished from the village, right? Easy peasy. All right. He calls this the rule of change, right? And finally, the third defect. Inefficiency, all right? This one's also very important, right? It sort of relates back to the first one. And so let me read the final extract we have here. Disputes as to whether an admitted rule has or has not been violated will always occur and will in any but the smallest societies continue interminably if there's no agency specifically empowered to ascertain finally and authoritatively the fact of violation, right? So say that we all agree what the rules are and that we don't need to change them just quite yet, right? However, someone claims at night, right, that they saw someone graze their cow on the wrong side of the valley once again, right? Very similar to the first rule, right? But the person, accused said that they saw someone else that night, right? That, the person, my neighbor actually did that. It wasn't even me, right? Now, the fact of the matter is that the rule is, questioning whether the rule actually has been broken or not, right? And everyone's gonna start questioning, has this person really grazed their cow on the wrong side of the valley, right? And so this kind of issue will continue interminably, right? Because, there's no really way to determine if it's actually been violated or not, right? There will be inefficiency in deciding whether or not these rules have been violated, right? If only we had a secondary rule that puts things in place like police and legal processes like trial, right? If we had something like that, then this issue of inefficiency would be solved, right? And so we would figure out whether or not this rule has or has not been broken, right? He calls this the rule of adjudication, right? Giving something or someone the power to adjudicate if the rule has been violated or not, right? Yeah.
So
Now,
if someone's been accused,
yeah, we can have adjudication to say, okay, has this person really broken that rule, right? And this could look like, in our current world, a trial, right? You go to court and you say, defendant pleads guilty. I mean, innocent. And then they sort of give their case, why they haven't broken the rule. That's how we solve it in our today's society, right? And the point is, right, primary rules, they suck by themselves, right? That's why we need secondary rules to help support them. Right? They solve each of their defects. Once we have all these secondary rules to enforce all the primary rules, they make them very plausible, and then we can finally give them the title of the law.
He said it. He said the word.
The law. Oh yeah.